Hello, and welcome to this episode of Monday Morning Detective, the podcast. I am your host, Gino Scala, and this is episode number 41. And today we're going to discuss the Menedez murder case, one that I'm personally familiar with, and many of you are also familiar with from having lived through the trial and the experience, etc. It was on the news virtually every day for back in the mid to late 90s. And the case is about Eric and Lyle Menedez, two rich, entitled boys who ended up shotgunning their parents to death in their Beverly Hills home. Now, it's considered one of the most violent, horrible, bloody crime scenes of all time, actually. And the online photos of the victims don't do real justice to this claim because they're in black and white and some parts are blurred out, etc. The interest has been renewed in this case because, for several factors, we have an entire generation of Gen Zers born in post 2000, when these murders had already occurred. The trial occurred, two trials occurred, and they were found guilty and sentenced to life without parole. Now, come 2000, 2001, 2002, and all these kids are born, and they somehow get interested in true crime, and they discover this case and leave it to Gen Zers to believe that they are innocent. And really they're basing their opinion on how these guys looked at the time of the killing. They were, I guess some people would call them attractive. One was already bald and wore an obvious hairpiece. And of course now in his 40s he shaves his head, as I do. But they were, tall, good-looking, rich, thin, athletic, very social, had a lot of girlfriends, and drove hot cars and wore Rolexes. So that is really what attracts these Gen Zers. Plus, they just kind of want to give it to the other generations before them, the Gen X's, the baby boomers, and so forth. By just being contrarian. That's my belief anyway. So now we have family members of the Menedez family, extended family, because the immediate family no longer exists, thanks to the boys. And they are, seeking their a new trial and seeking their release. Well, it's never going to happen, I'll tell you that. But just to give you a little background as to my personal involvement in this case, I was a licensed private investigator with several companies in Arizona and California. And we were hired by Diane Sawyer, the anchor person, for a show at that time called Primetime Live. It's kind of like Dateline and all these other shows, these magazine type shows that were popular at that time. And of course, this homicide grabbed the news for a couple of years, and there are many reasons why. It was initially a whodunit, and there was speculation of a mob hit and things of that nature. Plus, the father, Jose Menedez, was an executive with Carolco, which is a production company that produced a lot of famous movies, a lot of Stallone movies, for example. And he is of Cuban descent, and his wife was Kitty Menedez, a beauty queen at one time. And so this was a perfect American-made success story of a family. Now, fast forward several, years, these two boys grow up entitled. They were burglars and thieves growing up. So much so they had to be. They moved from the Valley to Beverly Hills as part of a plea agreement because they were caught burglarizing many houses out in that area. And they could afford it, so they moved. Well, they could not, it doesn't appear that they could stand to wait very long for the will to be passed down to them and the money. So they decided to take matters into their own hand. They purchased shotguns and killed the parents as they watch TV in the den. Now, getting back to Diane Sawyer, she hired me and my firm to locate the shotguns. The shotguns were not found at that time, but they wanted to find out if they were ever in possession of shotguns. And to make a long story short, I discovered through simply, really what I call gumshoe work, going almost door to door, but to businesses that sold shotguns. And I located a Big Five down in San Diego that had sold 2 Mossberg shotguns. Now, this in itself is not unusual, but the name attached to these shotguns was a former roommate of the older brother. He had stolen the guy's ID for his own brother to use, his younger brother to use, and able to get into bars, etc. At least that was the belief. So years later, he uses it to purchase these shotguns. This was found by me. I was able to look through their sales book, sales receipt, found the sales receipt, and notified ABC producers of the primetime show that we have located this information. After talks with Beverly Hills PD and Los Angeles County and all that, primetime decided to allow the sheriffs to go down, or Beverly Hills PD, I don't remember which, to go down and discover this information. And there are reasons for this. As a private person, a private entity, it's somewhat embarrassing to law enforcement agencies that a private detective or private detective agency would discover information that they had not at that point. Plus, it just makes it easier for the prosecution to have one detective testify to pretty much everything. Now, he's not going to discover everything, but if it's found, let's say a fingerprint, and then he comes out and secures the fingerprint, the chain of custody remains in that detective's hands. So he alone can testify to this situation. It would be way too confusing to call me to the stand and testify, and then testify that we alerted the producers, and the producers got them, and all that stuff. So it's just for ease. Now, I was listed as a witness and was subpoenaed to court. I was on a standby waiting list just in case this information got out. It's not illegal of what we did. It's just, it's very common to do, but it's just messy. And in case that information were to get out, the prosecution was prepared to put me on the stand if necessary. It turns out I did not have to go testify. However, I was at the Van Nuys court on several occasions and had run-ins with Leslie Abramson, the defense attorney for the brothers. Keep in mind that these boys were looking at the death penalty for a long period of time prior to an agreement that the death penalty would come off the table, I believe. And they were fighting for their lives. Now, I would never do this. I would never do this to my father or to anybody or to either parent. I would never destroy their reputation after having blown their heads off with a shotgun. But these boys didn't hesitate. And it takes a very evil soul to even come up with this defense. And I can tell you 100% this was Leslie's idea. This was becoming a common tactic in courts, even in the lower courts for simple assaults and things of that nature, to besmirch the reputation of the accuser. Fortunately, they made a lot of mistakes along the way, the boys did, and the first trial ended up in a hung jury. The second trial found them guilty. And there's no question. And on top of that, there's no question that, in my mind anyway, that the father had committed any kind of abuse. At this point, at the point of the trial, everybody was fighting for the money that the Menedez had left behind. Now add to that, the Gen Zers come along, and they've had 20 years of such cases of abuse and Me Too and all this stuff that convinces them that it's not only possible, but probable and definite that the father supposedly raped these two boys consistently, molested them. Well, it's easy to claim. There's absolutely no proof, none, no medical records whatsoever, no criminal reports whatsoever to support this claim. And when it's a one-sided accusation and the other side, the accused, is dead, what are you going to do? During the trial, these two boys put up a fantastic show of crying and being, definitely acting as if they were abused. Well, fortunately for the world and law enforcement, etc., the jury did not buy their story, and therefore they were found guilty. So I just wanted to share that my personal involvement in this case, as well as the knowledge that I have of the background of the case, and Leslie Abramson, who is a very, very tough defense attorney, but will stop at nothing to get her client off. Okay, so that wraps up episode 41 of Monday Morning Detective, and we hope to talk to you very soon.